There's always been a stigma that women with headaches were just trying to get out of housework or get out of sexual activity or things like this. This goes back hundreds of years. It is still active stigmas. Women are much more likely to try to hide something like a migraine condition and work through it, and often not get respect. And I've had this experience very clearly where I've been, I hope, a helpful advocate to women who were simply not getting the respect that they deserved because the problem they were having was a migraine.
Welcome to Migraine Again, helping you eat, breathe, survive, thrive, and engage better despite migraine. If you or someone you know struggles with migraine often, join us for today's insightful conversation. Now here's your host, founder and managing editor of MigraineAgain.com and co-host of the Migraine World Summit, Paula Dumas.
Is it possible to find meaning in your migraine story? You know, your story is not just where you came from, but where you're going and what binds us to each other. Today we're going to talk to one of the most masterful storytellers who has applied his pen to the topic of migraine. Oliver Sacks called his remarkable book a, quote, window into the whole landscape of body and mind, health and disease, and the sheer complexity of being alive. And that's pretty high praise. We'll introduce you to today's guest right after this.
Support for Migraine Again and today's podcast is brought to you by SpeakYourMigraine.com. Developed by Amgen and Novartis, SpeakYourMigraine.com gives people with migraine a voice, combining facts and shared experiences to break stigmas and paint a clearer picture of migraine. You're listening to Migraine Again. For show notes and resources from this episode, check out our program page on migraineagain.com. And now, once again, here's your host, Paula Dumas.
And we're here today with author Andrew Levy. Welcome to the program, Andrew.
Thank you, Paula.
We're so glad to have you here. And I really loved your book, A Brain Wider Than the Sky, A Migraine Diary, which you published a few years ago. But so much in it is absolutely true today. So it was a great read. In 2006, you became bedridden with debilitating migraines. Can you describe for us what happened?
Well, it was about, I'm going to say it was around a 4-month period where episodic migraines I had experienced from my early 20s suddenly became kind of near constant and cascaded upon each other, and also greatly increased in pain. And then those 4 months passed.
Must have been brutal.
Yeah, it was pretty bad, and it was helpless. It's like I couldn't. It just seemed like anything I did made them worse, and that I was, just faced with something that was completely out of my control.
And were you in and out of the hospital at that point in time?
No, I never went to the hospital. I mean, I did go to doctors, but it never even occurred to me to check myself in.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know a lot of people have had long stretches of unrelenting pain and can relate to exactly what you're talking about, because it is hard. You begin to lose hope. You begin to think, is my life forever changed?
Right, and I think, in my case, at some point I began to sense that there was a kind of a rebound or cascading quality to the migraines. The things I was doing to prevent migraines were creating migraines, or that, you would fall into a habit that would actually just assure that it would come back. So they just became kind of rolling.
You opened your book with a brilliant description of the strange yet familiar patterns that we all develop to combat the pain, using things like ice packs, pillows over your head, isolating ourselves and sleeping alone. But at the same time, your son was pretty young, and you had some responsibility for him as a parent. How did migraine impact your parenting?
Well, I guess, he was around 3 or 4 when most of this happened. And, in the book, I think I made a special point of stressing the guilt, which is to say that you want to be with your child. You want to make sure he's okay. You want to make sure you're providing, appropriate relief, and that you're a team with your spouse. And then suddenly you find yourself helplessly unable to do those things. And then, it's a range of factors. On one level, just, do you put him in another room for a couple of hours rather than keeping him company, reading him a book? do you stick them in front of the TV? Do you ask your wife to do more work? And then you begin to worry on the middle and higher levels or I did anyway, if not only if I was affecting him in some lingering way by being sick in front of him, it's like in a way that might affect him psychologically and affect his development, but also just, would there be a moment where I wasn't there, where I wasn't available, and a greater emergency might take place, and that was very difficult. So I would often put myself within earshot or even visual shot of him, and then do all those isolation techniques you just described. So I might lie with a pillow on my head or a ice pack on my head or rice steaming while he was 10 or 15 feet away. And it was a way of kind of, trying to do both things at the same time.
It's really hard. How did your then young son react to seeing Dad in pain or sick?
I think the thing about a migraine is, for me anyway, was that they're silent by and large to the outsider. I always felt I just was a kind of a morose figure. I think that I was very sensitive to light and sound, as many people with migraines are, and that could create moments of friction or unease, because kids like light and sound, and so that might strike someone who doesn't understand as a peculiar way to be. I still actually, 10 years up the line, there's still a big distinction in my house about having the lights on or off, and both my wife and my son want them on, and they want sound, and I'm always like shutting things off.
The light wars.
That's never stopped. But at the same time, I gotta say, and I give my son credit, I think that probably if there's one thing that ended up coming out of all this is that he's quite a good caregiver, and I don't want him to feel responsible for other people any more than he has to, but he's a considerate person, and he does recognize when people are ill at ease or uncomfortable or sick in situations with a kind of empathy that other kids don't. So maybe something good came out of this. Maybe that's just who he was going to be anyway. And I have certainly, during well periods ever since, made sure that he had a lot of quality time from me, because he's actually a great kid and a lot of fun to be around.
I'll bet. Well, those little boys can be rambunctious and noisy, and it's hard for them to sit still, because I had two of them myself. I remember that.
Yeah.
But it is impossible to teach empathy in any other way than them experiencing that kind of situation. So there may be a silver lining. You describe in the book 4 paths of a person with migraine. Can you tell us more about what those are?
Well, I think the 4 paths they actually kind of overlap to me a little bit. One is excessive stoicism, and that is absolutely where you just insist on pulling through everything. And you go to work and you do whatever work entails, and if you're wincing in pain and that fluorescent light is driving you crazy, you keep on keeping on, and until you just you burn out or collapse, or you just live your life. And that's people who do that, I think, are just they're just taking on the migraine. They're just gonna fight it and deny it, and I see a lot of people who do that, or I see almost everyone does some component of that, and I certainly have throughout the years. A second path is excessive Buddhism, which is essentially a way of saying of getting withdrawing completely. And I don't want to say accepting the migraine, because acceptance is a very complicated idea, but it does mean just giving in completely, clearing the space around you, excusing yourself from the room, making everyone work around your migraine, and to a certain extent that kind of breaks the conventional social contract, I think, that governs illness in this country, which is that you're supposed to worry and fret about what you're doing for other people, even as you want those other people to worry and fret about you. And that's, I think, it's good self-care. And I think it's crucial, but I think in many ways it does commit us too much to a practice where we don't pay enough attention to the bonds in our life, and the bonds in our life are actually, I think, part of living with migraines, and are helpful in that way. The third path I described as sensation junkies, and that's people who sort of dance with the devil, so to speak. The people who kind of deep down know that the chocolate or the coffee is creating their migraines as well as relieving it, but they keep on doing it. These are the people I see with like piles of Diet Coke cans in their offices. It's kind of, it's a mild version of what a sensation junkie is, but it's a way of saying, is that whatever sensations in the world are creating the migraines, walking in the direction of them. And actually creating a very complicated drama of your own life. And I think, I don't want to say these people just could have fewer migraines if they just dealt with them differently, because I don't think it's as simple as that. I think that at some point you might realize you're going to have migraines and that they're part of you. And this is a way of accepting that and making sure that your life has meaning and drama and shape. And the fourth is workaholism, which is really a great deal, like the first, excessive stoicism. And what I found after I published the book, when I was doing interviews in television studios, for instance, is that every time I would go to some site to do an interview, I would meet the interviewers and they would say, "Oh, we have someone on our staff who has migraines. Let me bring them in." And I would meet that person, and that person was invariably one of the hardest workers at the studio. And I think that there is a way that for some people, it's very important to let the world know that the migraines don't impinge on their ability to produce in the workplace. And I also think for other people, the migraine actually becomes something that they use or deploy to enhance, develop, grow their work. And that's something that I write elsewhere in the book about, in many cases, authors, artists, political leaders for whom migraines and headache conditions were actually essential parts of what made them the people we celebrate today.
That's fascinating. So we'll talk about that some more in just a minute, but I want to go back to the 4 different types, because as you meet people, you would be tempted, I'm sure, to put a bubble above their head and go, "Oh, well, that's the Stoic and that's the Buddhist and that's the sensation junkie." Yeah. But I can actually see elements of my own migraine journey featuring these different types. So at first I was like, "Oh, I was probably very stoic about it. I can tough this out. I can get through this." And then the sensation junkie, yes, I started to notice different things that I was feeling, and I was plying myself with a lot of Diet Coke, so that I could work and continue to work and medicate my way through the day, because I was really committed to my work, and my work distracted me from the fact that I was physically suffering so much every single day. And then finally, more back to the Buddhist of accepting that this is the thing that I have, and I really need to tune into my body and prioritize my health so that I can get better.
Yeah, that's a great synthesis. That's a really excellent description, both of a movement through these phases, but also a way that the phases will often kind of work with each other and even compete against each other. And several of these phases, to be clear, are also not having a diagnosis or not getting a diagnosis. So in many cases, the person with the migraine is actually refusing to say, "I'm a person with a migraine," or is saying, "I refuse to be defined as a person with a migraine," or is saying, "I refuse to let the migraine win." So a lot of these are positions of denial as well.
Right. Migraine is not the boss of me. I'm in charge.
Exactly. Exactly. I'm in charge here. You didn't stop me from going to work today.
Right. Well, when we come back, we're going to talk about some strange conversations that our guest today, author Andrew Levy, had at migraine parties. I'm Paula Dumas, and you're listening to Migraine Again.
Just a quick thanks to Amgen and Novartis, the makers of SpeakYourMigraine.com. Go to SpeakYourMigraine.com on your computer, tablet, or smartphone to take the Migraine Impact Assessment Test so you can understand how much of an impact migraine has on your life. Hey, we'd like to hear about your life with migraine and offer some help and encouragement if we can. If you've got a question about migraine, we'll do our best to answer it and might even include it on one of our upcoming podcasts. If you'd like to submit a question, just go to our website, migraineagain.com/question.
We're back. I'm Paula Dumas with Migraine Again, and we're here with author Andrew Levy, who wrote the book, A Brain Wider Than the Sky. So, Andrew, you talk in your book about migraine parties. What's the conversation like there?
Oh, well, it's when you've had a migraine. For me, you've had a migraine all day, and maybe it's lifted a little bit, but you go to the party anyway because you're in your excessive stoicism mode. and then you tell someone, and they're like, oh, and it's like the party's got to now be a much quieter party. And you have
Debbie Downer, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then you're mortified, right? Because, it wasn't part of the social contract. You want to be honest with people and tell them who you are. And at that moment, the migraine is a big part of who you are. And they don't understand, no, I saw you yesterday. I had a migraine. I didn't tell you. I taught a class yesterday with a migraine. Nobody knew. It was, so you don't understand that that's because it's a party and it's social. You're opening up.
Right.
But the moment you open up, you've completely changed the party. And it might lead to some people acknowledging that they have headaches or have in the past as well, or analogous, something else that ails them in some other way, or they might enter into kind of a skeptical mode, like, oh, I get headaches too, or, oh, really, can you take some aspirin for that? Or the people who are, overly solicitous. And it's, the range of the effects is so dramatic. And I think it's good in one way because you still are getting it out of your system. You're not hiding it. And it gives you a much better roadmap, I think, of what the people around you think of you. So in a certain sense, you come out of it kind of, I think, healthier. But, it's still awkward.
As you say, it can suck the life out of the room. So it depends on the kind of party you're at as to whether you feel like sharing or not. If you're at a great humdinger of a Halloween party, you might not want to bring it up.
On the other hand, the humdinger, no one notices you that much, so it's not so bad. It's not like everyone's going to, at a big Halloween party, I've never found that people said, oh, Andy has a migraine, turn down that music, take off your costumes. It never really worked that way. So it's, and in many ways, there's a good question about what I'm even doing at that humdinger of a party. So it works, it's different dynamics all the time. For me, it's always different dynamics. But what I did feel strongly was that you can't keep going to party after party and not telling anyone that you're sick. Not with migraines, because in a certain sense, I actually became rebellious. I mean, if I had something I would regard as treatable, if I didn't like the dinner, for instance, I wouldn't say that dinner makes my stomach uneasy, because that's party rudeness. But at some point, people have to know who you are. And otherwise, what's the point of going to a party except to let people know who you are? And so I became rebellious. I didn't think like a migraine was something I had to hide. And I decided, I'd rather find more situations where I was being public about it and dealing with it myself and making other people deal with it. And I think, like I said, that's why I think ultimately it's kind of a healthy process to resist a little bit.
So are there any benefits that you see for discussing your migraine in public or online?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, at this point, I do it very frankly. And, it's everything I just said before. It makes me, it allows me to describe the full person I am, which I think is something everyone wants. I think it also allows people to see and normalize migraine and familiarize it with them. It allows and encourages other people to talk about it. I mean, I found in conversations after I published the book that it meant a lot to people that I said I struggled with my parenting. That was something people were very afraid to talk about, felt a lot of guilt about, a lot of confusion, don't want social services to know I have a headache with my child, the whole gamut of shame. And when in fact it should be a problem that people are talking about and sharing solutions for.
Right. And authenticity draws us to people. When you have an invisible illness and you're trying to hide it,
right,
you're not really connecting with people at the same level that you could be.
Right, and to be clear, that word invisible is the key word, right? Which is that, your brain can be raging. This is the thing that always amazes me, is your brain is raging. It's screaming at you, and then people are just talking to you, right? They don't see it. There's just like this massive shield between you and other people. And if you don't deal with that, you start to feel alienated from people. I almost felt like migraines were like a crash course in alienating yourself from other people. It's like, well, the difference between what's going on inside my brain and the conversation, my outward self, is so dramatic that you just think, what are these people? Why can't they see? Don't I look tired at least? I mean, it's just they don't seem to notice anything. And I grew to hate that. I really did. Yeah.
So how does it work when you are in the classroom? You're an English professor. Do you face any stigma from the academic community or from students? Do you share? Do you hide? What do you do?
Well, I think, first of all, I'm very lucky that I don't have a sort of 9-to-5 job. Professors work hard, but their jobs are broken up into a lot of different tasks. And so for me, I've really kind of had the entire spectrum of experiences in the classroom. Had moments, where I had a little migraine or and kind of half the class disappeared in my eyesight, or I just get that kind of migrainous tingle. And then those are actually, that tends to be the case more than any single other interface I have in the classrooms. It's the coming of a migraine, and that you negotiate with, but you're generally out of the class in time. I have a bit of a reputation for keeping the lights off in classes when they should be on, and I actually don't explain that to the students. I just say, isn't it nice to have natural light? But that's a solution I made because I figured out that one of my triggers was, this nasty fluorescent lighting, and that I don't really, there's no rule that says you got to have fluorescent lights on all the time. It's usually helpful just to recognize that, not make a big deal out of it. If I have a headache and it's very bad, I will still teach the class. I may, at this point, I certainly have a reservoir of B plans ready to go, oral presentations or group work, which can minimize my responsibility in that particular class to be up and talking the whole time, but simultaneously still advances the class. And then sometimes I cancel. And, this description, I suggest, makes it all seem smooth. There's awkward moments where you're in between choices all the time. But so it's kind of an ongoing negotiation. And I don't think it's, I think anyone with a migraine probably does it from time to time. But if you've had the same job for years like I've had, you at least have a very, well-worn set of experiences to draw from.
Right. Having a flexible schedule makes a huge difference for so many people with migraine. So I'm glad that your talent afforded you that opportunity to do that. So what's your experience like being a man in a migraine world that's completely populated, at least online, by women?
Yes, thank you for asking. And just another way that I've been lucky is that I'm a man in the society with migraines, and that over roughly 2/3 of migraine sufferers are women, and that most of the problems of social stigma, most of the problems of cultural expectation, the stoicism issues really affect women in a much more dramatic way. There's always been a stigma that women with headaches were just trying to get out of housework or get out of sexual activity or things like this. This goes back hundreds of years. It is still active stigmas. Women are much more likely to try to hide something like a migraine condition and work through it. And often not get respect. And I've had this experience very clearly where I've been, I hope, a helpful advocate to women who were simply not getting the respect that they deserved from higher-ups because the problem they were having was a migraine, and that the higher-up just simply didn't believe that was an actual illness. Even sensitive higher-ups don't believe migraine is an illness that you need to treat the way any other illness is treated, or that you make amendments in the workplace. You create moments or opportunities for flexibility. It's simply not a thing that most bosses know.
I think you have been an example for many men who are hiding their condition or calling it sinusitis or cluster or something else that is better understood and less associated with women. And you've been a liberator for a lot of women whose condition has not been publicly validated in a culture or in the workplace. So that's a very valuable thing for both genders.
Yeah, and to be clear, in a lot of more masculine contexts, there also has been much more of an awakening. If you look at, for instance, the National Football League's injury reports, you'll find that athletes will now say that they missed a game due to migraine. It's listed there, and in many ways, that's a sign of the willingness of the most machismo men in the country, and football players to say I missed work because I had a migraine is in its own way another kind of breakthrough.
It definitely is. And when you've got warriors coming back from combat talking about migraine as a serious disorder, and you've got basketball players and football players and other athletes who are stepping forward and saying, yeah, this is a serious condition and it's disabled me. A strong, vital man who's obviously an athlete and gets lots of exercise. This has taken me to my knees. People begin to respect and regard migraine in a different way.
Yeah, but even still, recently I had an experience where I kind of got involved as an advisor in a kind of difficult negotiation where a woman professor was trying to explain how migraines could, interface with certain kinds of workplace stress, and that relieving the stress through some very basic moves in physical space, frankly, would be very likely to alleviate the migraines. There's kind of a big gray area, and I think that it was I wouldn't describe it as a difficult negotiation, but I felt like there was a lot of explaining to do, and where it was just really a question of, can you just put a lamp in there instead of fluorescent lights? Sometimes it's not complicated. Just put a lamp in there, and the boss says, lamp, really? How's that a thing I have to do? You say, well, because it's been proven that such lights, it's just, there's still a lot of places, and I think there's still a lot of women who struggle to be heard. Definitely true.
Thank you.
Right.
And we're here today with Andrew Levy, author of A Brain Wider Than the Sky. More right after this.
A quick thanks to our advertisers, Amgen and Novartis, who have developed the SpeakYourMigraine.com website, where you can read stories, gather tools, and resources to help change the migraine conversation. It's time to turn private pain into collective change at SpeakYourMigraine.com. This is Migraine Again, encouraging and empowering you in your battle against migraine because you deserve to feel better. You can hear this conversation again or share it with someone who might like to hear it by going to migraineagain.com. Now, once again, here's Paula.
And we're back with Andrew Levy, author of A Brain Wider Than the Sky. What kind of lifestyle changes eventually facilitated your reemergence into the world, kind of back to work and teaching and writing?
I think it's still important to understand and accept a certain level of helplessness, although I can say that because I'm better now. But simultaneously, I got to a good neurologist. I got to someone who knew headaches. I think people take way too long to get there because there are not enough headache specialists in the country still, and because as much as I love most of the neurologists I've ever worked with my entire life, there's a difference between a headache specialist and a general neurologist. And I think a lot of people barely get past their GP. Then they might get to a neurologist. But to get to a specialist, someone who really understands, who knows the latest information, who asks you good questions, is hugely helpful. I did a lot of, I think, what you would describe as a diary of my own life, of the things I was doing wrong that might be creating headaches. You noted that I would feel something after I drank a little bourbon. Well, I don't don't drink bourbon in the same way anymore, which is too bad because bourbon is a great thing. And but these things help. What I did come out of that experience was a so much better roadmap of my own body and my own brain. And in many ways, the best thing I did for myself was that roadmap of my body and my brain. And in terms of how I felt at certain times in the morning, what a certain tingle meant, what drug might help, what habit to break might work. And that a series, constant unending series of experiences like that, combined with better medical care and testing several different sort of medicines until I found something that worked, and then breaking some habits, truly breaking some rebounding habits, really helped.
Mm-hmm. Well, you shared with me that writing the book actually helped you dramatically advance your condition, and I found the same thing in developing Migraine Again and producing that, and then the Migraine World Summit. The access that I had to world-leading specialists was something that helped me get much better, and focusing on it helped me get much better. So
I think that's a great point. Yeah. Which is, and as I was doing the book, I met and talked to a lot of neurologists, and you pick up some good advice. But you feel less alone. To feel like you're part of a community of people who are working on this. I did some lobbying work at Headache on the Hill, where a group of neurologists and maybe 2 writers and patient advocates would go, for a single day down to Washington and knock on congressional doors and appeal to congressmen and senators to support specific research, initiatives designed to make sure that headache research got the appropriate attention that it deserves. And I love those experiences. It was great to be around those people for a day or two. It was just uplifting.
Inspiring. And we'll put a link to Headache on the Hill in the show notes for anybody who's interested in doing that. So how can we reframe our own story with migraine in a more positive way?
Well, I think, part of the experience for me is at the base of it all. I was having terrible, terrible migraines, and I was just lying in bed, and the whole thing was shapeless and meaningless. And I forced myself to write descriptions of how the migraine felt, which meant, in a bizarre way, really, really feeling the migraine. Not, if I had an ice pack on my head and I'd done everything else I could do, and I was lying in darkness, and I knew it wasn't going to go away for a few hours, I did whatever I could to commune with it, and then I wrote about it immediately. And I'm not saying that's what anyone else should do, but I do think that getting that moment where you start to give your life a shape and meaning, dancing with the migraine, not running from it, it was absolutely for me the first step to any kind of sort of recovery. I think, again, it depends on the migraines you have and how they affect you. In the aftermath, after writing this book, when I was doing a few readings, I have found at every reading exactly what you would expect, that almost everyone in the room was someone with migraines or someone who was with someone with migraines. And there were a lot of people who were in conditions that were persistent for years, untreatable. A surprising number of veterans, 2009, 2010, 2011, people coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan with migraine conditions. There's been research. The Army's done research on that, and these were the head injury wars. And every war has its own kind of injuries, but these wars were the ones that brought back a lot of people, with severe head conditions, including, a dramatic increase in the number of migraines inside their population. And a lot of this stuff, those people had been trying just everything. And so a lot of my advice, to be honest with you, is for people who are in a condition where they can have the opportunity to adjust, to amend, to both accept but also fight. But some people, the headache is just too bad, and I always provide that as a caveat to my advice, which is that I think there's gradations here. I was lucky because I had the kind of migraines that could go away. And that was a fairly normal set of recognition techniques, admitting to myself that I had them, admitting that A, I hated them, but B, they were not going away if I didn't do anything, recognizing that it was an actual illness, accepting that there was no stigmas that I really gave a damn about. All these things started to help me give shape and form and meaning to the experience, and respecting it and not trying to just deny it or run from it.
Well, I'm glad that writing the book really helped you through that process. Few of us will ever be as talented as you are with the written word, but I think there's something very cathartic about writing out your own story and recasting yourself as the brave warrior or the hero instead of the victim from this disabling disorder. So if you've got a migraine story, we want to hear it, and your story can inspire and encourage others, but really only if you share it. So we're going to try to make it easy for you. We'll add a link to our Migraine Journey format and encourage everyone. If you're listening today and you've got a great story, you can just follow that link in our show notes to the Migraine Journey and share that. It could really inspire someone else, as your book, Andrew, has inspired so many of us. So I want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
And thank you for your rich insights into this illness, whose effects are, really discounted a lot. And while the people who experience them are often dismissed, and it's really important. And I'm very thankful for the work that you've done. And one more thing, Andrew and I talked about how much we had both personally benefited from learning from these world-class headache and migraine specialists, and you can too. We've made that easy for you to access no matter where you live online through the Migraine World Summit. You can go to migraineworldsummit.com, and we'll include a link to that under the show notes here, and get access every year to 36 world-leading headache and migraine specialists who can really help you make progress in your journey. So thank you so much, Andrew Levy. His book is A Brain Wider Than the Sky.
Thank you for having me on the program, Paula.
And I'm Paula Dumas, wishing you all a pain-free day.
And that wraps up part 1 of our conversation with Andrew Levy. Next time, part 2 of that conversation as we talk about famous leaders and thinkers throughout history with migraine, including Darwin, Caesar, Freud, and Thomas Jefferson. If you want to suffer less and live more despite migraine, check out the resources on migraineagain.com. Follow us on your favorite social network and subscribe to our free newsletter and this program. Then join us again next time for part 2 with Andrew Levy on Migraine Again. You'll be glad you did.